Man, you might want to put a piece of tape on it. Hold it there.
Once it starts sucking.
Oh, yeah.
Empacado. Déjalo así para que prenda.
Shit.
Very casually just walk over.
Turn it off and it gets like back in there.
You gotta close it.
Vale, prende que es good. Échale un fuego. Come on, let's walk. Get that.
Yeah!
Oh! Who next?
Go.
Yeah! Yeah!
Hit you with it in the face.
We're gonna get all the fucking horses high as fuck. Right? Okay. Fuck. Let's go. 120, vamos. Oh, hold on.
Hey, with the torch!
Hello. Hi. Welcome to Bourbon. Hi. Not as high as wow. That was fun just watching.
Yeah. Well, that seems like a gigantic waste of weed in that you'd like a lot of the smoke is blowing all away, but definitely interesting. It's like the beer bong of weed.
Right. I mean, that's what you bring to a picnic, right?
Yeah, I guess.
Legally, of course.
In your state.
Speaking, right. Not mine, but
yeah.
I have a Super Creek from Modern Times.
Ooh.
In the group, if you're familiar, we call it Modern Fucking Times.
Mm-hmm.
So, hats off to David Rogers for this. Thanks, buddy. The only way I can get Modern Times. It's a creek, so it is barrel aged with cherries, and it is fantastic. I couldn't wait to jump on it before we were drinking it in pre-production and everything.
Yeah. So you said that cherries. We have a lot of people that are anti-cherries in drinks.
Yeah, but I thought that our buddy Kevin McKeever, who's coming up here on the schedule soon, I thought he was cool with creeks. I thought he was cool with sours, not cough syrupy type cherry.
Yeah, well, you can make the case that might be cough syrupy, maybe.
I'm not.
All right.
So how is it? Be made though. I mean,
yeah. How is it?
It's great, man. It's tart. I don't know if you're familiar with creeks. I don't like cherries at all. I don't eat cherries. I don't like really generally the taste. And I generally agree with Kevin McKeever, but the tartness that a creek brings and then that barrel aging, it's just fantastic. I love it. I wouldn't say I could drink them all day like Casey does, but I could drink them. I could drink. Yeah, this is a good one.
Yeah. What was the ABV on that one, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm not sure. I'll look for you while it's a sour, so it's not going to be shouldn't be too 7.5.
Well, it's barrel aged, you said, yeah?
Barrel aged sour ale with cherries.
Yeah, so maybe that's how. That's pretty high for a sour though, but
it's great.
Yeah.
What's going on in your
one you sent me from Delta Beer Labs, coffee infused brown. So
all right.
Let's see.
Did someone say wine? Absolutely. We're going to have wine talk in about here very soon. Absolutely. And to set it up, Doug and I aren't wine drinkers generally. I've never seen Doug drink wine. I don't think he's ever seen me drink wine. We've never had wine on the show.
Nope.
We are wine friendly though. Or at least I know I am. Pull it up. It's great. I actually started in wine, Doug, before I did my craft beer, going to craft beer. I was really hard into wine, actually, believe it or not.
See, my thing was wine is if I drank wine when I was younger, it was like Boone's, like real shit cheap stuff. And then when I was able to try more advanced stuff, I found I liked the flavor of reds because of the oakiness.
Right.
They did not like me the next day very much at all. That's one of the few things I drink that I am guaranteed to get hangovers the next day. So it's why I generally stay.
Okay. Well, maybe Kern will have something for us for that too. But how's what you're drinking first?
So this is a really nicely balanced coffee brown. I mean, we've talked a million times about coffee being a really overpowering flavor, but it mellows really nice in the brown ale. The nuttiness and the toastiness really kind of work super well together. It's really drinkable. It's only 5.2 ABV. Like I would say, not a hot summer day, but like any other time of year, probably really good. I think. So yeah, thank you for sending this to me.
Thanks, man. More coming. I'm soon going to be stepping out.
Oh, what?
To the real world again. Yeah, what's that? Right. So, listen, no further ado, get to our guest. His name is Chris Kern. He is a wine guy. We'll get to the whole wine thing. He's a podcaster. We've both been on this podcast. One bourbon, one chard,
one beer.
And we'll get into the concept of all that, how that shit started. He has a wine club for you winos out there. So, and I know you're there too, because I know people, I mean, again, I don't think people are one trick ponies. I don't think people just drink beer. I don't think people just, have cocktails. I think people are all over the place kind of, and they have their spectrum of what you are open to and whatever you're doing. And wine, in my opinion, has a nice place where again, I should be jumping out more and having more wine.
Yeah, I think maybe our guest here can give me specifically some stuff that I could have that would be less hangover inducing. And also might be the fact that if I'm drinking wine, I'm probably going to drink a bottle of it instead of just having like one or two glasses. That might be
right. And we probably won't be able to get into it, but wine is, I'm not going to say, and maybe Kern and I will argue on this, but I want to say wine is as diverse as beer. I want to say that. But like all the different kinds of like grapes and where it comes from, it just makes it really dynamic actually in a way. So real quick though, so I met Kern through Stub, who was our first remote guest. We met at the Beer Bloggers Conference. He rolls up to me at 9 o'clock in the morning with some bourbon, and I knew that we were going to be friends. It was the first thing I had. And so Kern and Stub do the podcast that we mentioned. And so I was invited to that, and I met Kern. So we're going to bring him on so I can't stumble through another intro. And he's way more smoother than me, I will say. He's definitely smoother than me.
I am very smooth, and I will say that Stern is Stubbs in my ship name.
That's what I was going to say. Stern.
For all the Kern Stubbs shippers out there, that's the Stern thing, exactly. So
there we go. Welcome, Chris Kern. How you doing?
Gentlemen, I am fantastic, and thank you so much for having me on the show for a second time, and more importantly, for one more time than you've had Stub on the show. So I have something to hold over him for every episode of One Bourbon, One Chard, or One Beer that we record. So
it's true.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Wow.
Two-time Brothers and Booze guest.
Cheers. And what's in the glass?
Salud. So my beer tonight is, it's wine, which, the best way to think about it is it's basically beer made with grapes instead of wheat. This is a little ditty that comes from a fantastic way. I did something that I have not done in like 5 years time recently, which is I joined a wine club. Being in the wine industry, you tend to get the best deals when you go to wineries, or you get a lot of free product from friends, swaps, people wanting you to review or try things. But there is a winery. So his tasting room is in the Napa Valley, in actually the town of Napa in Northern California. It's a gentleman named Matthew Rorick, and his winery is called Forlorn Hope. And why he is simpatico with me is because he focuses on lesser known and uncommon varietals. And much like you guys have in the beer world, you have really obscure beers, obscure ways of making beer, beers made with obscure products. You have the same thing in the wine world. You have these very obscure grapes that are only grown in small parts of the world, very little acreage of it here in the United States. And Matthew specializes in these. So that's a long way of saying this is his 2019 Pick Pool is the name of the grape. It's a white grape, as you can see. I'm in California, still sun up, and we're starting to get a little warm here, which is nice. But it's a fun grape. It's grown primarily in the Languedoc region of France, which is down on the Mediterranean coast, south around the town of Marseille, between Marseille and I'm already losing you guys, aren't I?
No, we don't go into. We don't have as much knowledge on our beer stuff. Like you're like, hey, in this region, we're like, the hops from the ground.
Yeah. Thank you, Daniel. And I am the king of nerdy varietals, so I can talk for the next 5.5 hours, which is how long I understand this goes, about weird, or as I call them, the forgotten grapes, which is my brand as it happens to be. Anyway, the most important thing to remember about Pickpool is that its nickname is the Lip Stinger. So this is super dry, super tart, very lemony. It would be like if you drank a Mike's Hard Lemonade, only it was good, is the best way I can put this. So,
cheers to that analogy.
Yes, cheers to that. Yes. And I am happy to fight you about the wide variety of wine versus beer. Okay. All day if you want to. No, you were absolutely right. Wine is, there's lots of different ways to produce it. So you have variants in the production style. Not just red, white, rosé, sparkling, dessert wines, but, using oak barrels versus stainless steel tanks versus concrete in a place like the country of Georgia, not the state of Georgia, because nobody goes to the state of Georgia anymore. They use these big earthenware. You're picking down when I'm putting up.
You're putting out, yeah.
Right, exactly. But they use these huge earthenware amphora that are buried underground, and that's actually what they age the wine in. There are certain, like on the island of Madeira in Portugal, they actually will put the barrels out on the beach and rock them back and forth and expose them to the sun and the heat to mimic the ancient sea voyages of the 15th, 16th century, 17th century to create wines that mimic the way those were made. So there is, and that's not even getting into the, somewhere in the realm of maybe 7,500 different wine varieties, grape varieties that are out there. So it's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's where, I think it's not that there isn't a bunch of different ways to make beer. There is, but it's not as varied as that. And also, I feel like, and maybe I'm misspeaking here, but I feel like wine's a little bit more nuanced in how the differences in flavors work. It's not saying that you can't have nuances in beer, but it feels like wine is, I think, someone like me who doesn't have a very refined palate.
Here we go.
That's true. Are we allowed to swear on this podcast?
Absolutely.
Okay, well then let me just start this off with one of the trademarks of One Bourbon, One Chard, or One Beer, which is a fuck you stub for just commenting right now. No, you're right. Here's one of the biggest differences between wine and beer is when you're making a beer, if something goes wrong, if the batch doesn't turn out, you can just throw it away and start again and make a new one and have it done in, a week, 2 weeks, maybe a month's time. With wine, you basically get one shot every year to make your wine because, you harvest the grapes, you press them, you ferment them, you put them into barrel, and then you basically kind of sit and pray. And if your yeast gets spoiled or your equipment isn't clean enough, you're pretty much fucked for the year. So there's a lot more of a higher risk factor when it comes to wine as opposed to beer or spirits. And I think that's one of the beauties of beer, is that it allows allows the beer makers, the brewers, to experiment, do all sorts of things, add in fruit, add in, everything, because if it screws up, they can just make slight variations on it, and you can do it pretty much instantaneously.
Yeah, and another thing too is recently here in Wisconsin, we had a bad grape year. And literally, or was it last year before? It was recent. But the point of the story is that, like, I read an article about how literally the winemaker was like crying because this got all wiped out. And I was just like, wow, I couldn't even really put myself in that place as even a beer person or anything, where like literally the man was crying because he had no grapes. He couldn't salvage them. The ones that he could salvage, he could maybe make ice wine, or you know what I'm saying, Kern. He couldn't really come through for what he said. And I was like, that was the first time I really thought about wine in this kind of like context, where it just seems like grapes are more fragile than the things that we put in beer too. Some of the instrument are grapes. I say grapes, right? So grapes are more fragile than the wheat or the barley that we put in to beer. I don't know if you want to talk to anything about that either while we're here.
No, you're absolutely right. You basically have a process, like you're growing any product, any agricultural product. You have a harvest period, where you plant it, or in this case, the vines are already planted. But while that production, while the growing period is happening, there's a ton of different variables that can happen. Things like early frosts in March or April, when the buds are starting to break on the vines, and actually that's what's happening right now in France. They just had a huge frost that decimated a lot of the grape crop up there, even before there were even bunches on the vines, because you have to have above freezing temperatures when these little buds break, or else they can be ruined. And pretty much it's terrible. At the same time, then you're dealing with birds, you're dealing with deer that love to eat the grapes off the vine. You're dealing with wild boar, depending on where you are. You've got mildew, you've got rot, you've got insects that come in and will attack it. You can get too much sun. You can have, too much rain. One of the amazing things about wine and grape growing is that you want the vines to suffer as much as possible. So you want to give them as little water as possible, make them really force their roots down on the surface, pick up as much of the good minerally water as they can. And you want to give them a lot of sun, but at the same time, you don't want too much sun, or else the grapes can burn or start to raisin or whatnot. So I've been talking too much, but we can get into all of the variables, and it really makes wine growing a true labor of love. And
Nice.
I'm just going to ask a question so there's obviously tons of varieties of grapes. And obviously it's whether they're a white grape or a red grape. I'm just going to, for the layman like me who doesn't understand shit about wine, that's how I'm divvying it up. So you're in California, and there's different grapes there. Like I live near the Finger Lakes, New York, and it's completely different grapes here.
Right.
So what are some of the more common grapes that are used there? Ones that are, some of them I imagine are more finicky. So if you get the hardier ones, you might stick to them a little more. Maybe, is that how it works?
Absolutely. Grapes they actually have a what they call a heat index chart that they use to measure which regions can handle certain grapes. And I believe there's 7 or 8 different levels of the heat index. And what it's determined by is how many what they call heat index days you get per year. where, grapes need a certain amount of time to fully ripen and need plenty of heat and sun exposure to do so. So if you're in a place like the Finger Lakes area that, you're only looking at maybe, 150 to 160 days above 75 degrees over the course
not
of
even
a year.
that much here, but
Yeah, it might even be less. There are certain grapes that you can grow there and certain grapes that you absolutely should not grow there because they're just not going to properly ripen. Conversely, if you live like places in California, especially as you get closer to Southern California, where, we have, like 200, 250, sometimes even 300 heat index days. There are certain grapes that are much hardier that you want to grow in those areas. So, there are grapes like Cabernet Sauvignon is one that is one of the most widely planted grapes out there, but it can handle just about any environment. Cabernet Franc, which is a grape that has grown quite a bit in the Finger Lakes. You'll find it in Virginia as well. Quite a bit here in California. That's a very late ripening grape. So the fact is you can grow that in a warmer environment or a cooler environment like upstate New York or other parts of the East Coast or even the Midwest, because you tend to have more heat later in the year where the grape likes that. Something like, Grenache or Mourvedre, which tend to require lots of heat for a long period of time, aren't going to do as well in New York. But in a place like I am in Paso Robles on the central coast of California, where we get a lot of heat, especially days over 90 and even close to 100, those are grapes that are really going to do well in this environment because we have a long stretch of heat for them. So not to get too technical in the weeds, but the heat of the day and the number of days that you have that hit an adequate amount of heat will determine which grapes work best in your environments. Yeah. And so like one of the beautiful things about California is because we have so many different environments from, deserts to mountains, high elevation, low elevation, places where it gets very cool, places close to the coast, we can pretty much grow just about any grape here in California that we want to, which is part of why the winemaking industry has really exploded here in California, is because we have such temperate weather, long days of summer that, you can grow everything from the coolest Alsatian white grapes like Riesling, like Gewürztraminer, Pinot Gris, Pinot Blanc, getting into the really hardy, heat-resistant grapes like Cinsault, Zinfandel, Carignan, the bigger reds that require a lot of heat to make them.
Look at this. This is one of the few times the brothers have been speech.
Yeah. As we're out of our depth.
But that's okay. That's so it's funny you guys mentioned that because my whole thing and how phylloxera exactly. One of the things that I launched my Forgotten Grapes brand on was finding a way to take things like really obscure varietals that people have never heard of and make them approachable to the basic wine drinker, the average wine drinker, people who have no knowledge of wine, and to make it, among the wine intelligentsia, you hear the word about, I want to make wine approachable to everybody. I don't want wine to be intimidating. You hear that quite a bit, which is important. But at the same time, you've got to make it fun because it's like beer, man. Beer can be intimidating. Beer started out when I first started drinking, Rolling Rock and Heineken were the most exotic beers that we could get our hands on.
St. Pauli Girl?
Yeah,
St. Pauli Girl, yeah. Actually, so
we had
fun.
Moosehead too. That was
the moose. I had some friends of mine from college who lived down in Charlottesville, Virginia, or actually Northern Virginia, but they knew that Charlottesville was the furthest point north at that point where they could get their favorite beer, which was the Abita Turbo Dog. Yeah. So what they would do is at the start of college in September, they would pick up a keg of Turbo Dog from a liquor store in Charlottesville, drive it up to New Jersey where we went to college. We would basically spend the first 2 or 3 months of the semester, polishing off as much of that keg as we could. And then when they went down for fall break or Thanksgiving or whenever we ended up kicking the keg, they would just drive it back down and get their deposit. But that was one of my first experiences with a real like unique craft beer. I still love the Turbo Dog to this day. And now, the beauty of it is it's available pretty much everywhere around the country.
Yeah.
So I'm going to show everybody this hop butcher. Sabro, Simcoe, and Citra hop.
Ooh, that's a combo.
Wonderful double IPA. Look at that.
Sounds so up your alley, that with the Sabro and all.
It's beautiful. It's wonderful. Juicy and pineapple and some coconut and some citrus. But listen, no. Really, more importantly, when I was showing this earlier, Kern, I saw you moving. I just wanted to see if you had any comments on that, and also comments on that. But also, though, before, and let me wrap another question in there, and then you can just roll. Yeah. So this is a wine culture question.
Okay.
When weed became available recreation-wise in Colorado, the buzz around the craft beer industry was that it's going to take people from the craft beer industry, and they're not going to be spending money for craft beer because they're going to get all high and all this other stuff. Now, the anecdotal evidence says, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, our friend Julia Hurst talks about this. She used to work for craftbeer.com. She said that there was really no, I believe she said there was no, like, you couldn't really point to craft beer was down and all beer was down, and of course weed was up, but you couldn't really point to that. So how does the wine culture look like in California when it has kind of the same elements, where you guys have had recreational weed for a couple years now? And initially I don't see the recreational weed people and the wine people being the same people, but I could be wrong.
There is some crossover in that Venn diagram. It's not, it's not a perfect flat circle, but there definitely is. There are wine people who love their weed, and I have to admit, when I was watching that video, I am not a smoker, but I had the same thought that Doug did, which is that is a waste of some perfectly good weed right there. That's like to me, that's like buying a $100 or $200 first growth, or more than that, or like a nice Napa Cab or something, and then mixing it with Coca-Cola to drink it together. Because that's got to be at least like $100-$150 worth of weed. That's like, that's like,
or mixing it with cocaine.
Right. Whatever that might be. It seems like there's better delivery systems than that. But to get back to your question, Greg, which I think is a good one, we had the same fears in the wine industry, that there was a lot of people who thought that wine sales were going to be down because of the legalization of weed here in California. And, part of the reason it's been tempered is because it's still not federally legalized. That's going to be the real gateway, because there's still people, it's still more difficult. You have to jump through some hoops to get your weed. It's becoming easier and easier, but you still have to go out and get your medical card and go to a dispensary. It's not like you can just go down to your local Walgreens or whatnot and pick up an eighth of an ounce or whatnot. But
like you can in Colorado.
Right, exactly. Which, you guys in Washington to a certain extent have been well ahead of the curve for that.
Too. Okay,
but
right.
I remember hearing somebody made a really great point, which is, like, if you're sitting at home by yourself or with your loved one, there may be a choice then of, do I spend $25, $30 on a bottle of wine, or on, some nice weed that we can partake together. But if you're going to a dinner party with friends, you're not necessarily going to bring, a bag of Mary Jane with you. And especially like if you go to a restaurant, it's great to have a meal and a blunt, but what are you going to wash that down with? So the wine industry isn't necessarily going to go away. There's certainly it will take a chunk out of it, but at the same time, I think most people I know, there are nights where you want to smoke and there are nights where you want to drink, and you're willing to do both. I don't know a lot of people who are, and I came up with a term for what you guys were talking about. It's monolibationists. And that's the key, is don't be monolibationists, become polylibationists.
Throwing out the poly there. Bold move.
Yes, exactly. Like, again, and that's part of what One Bourbon, One Chard, and One Beer is all about celebrating, is every aspect of the booze industry. Steb and I are, for lack of a better term, professional drunks. So we dabble in everything from, the weirdest gose we can find to, magnums of, I always mispronounce that, gose, right?
No, that's my next beer. So,
nice. Okay, good. Yes. To, magnums of the finest that Napa in France has to offer, to golden bourbon from Kentucky, and Ryan Reynolds Aviation Gin. Like, we do everything.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, wait, Ryan Reynolds Aviation Gin is not a bad gin. It's not great, but it's not bad.
Yeah, no, and it is. I have to go pick up some bottles tomorrow because our local Bevmo is doing a special on it. Our big chain liquor store around here, and he just recruited LeVar Burton for the brand. So I love that. There's a hilarious online commercial of Ryan Reynolds and LeVar Burton pitching Aviation Gin, which I recommend checking out.
Yes, LeVar Burton, the next Jeopardy host. But have you seen? Or we're gonna say?
I was gonna say the only thing that made me sad was LeVar didn't say during it, but you don't have to take my word for it, like he did in every Reading Rainbow episode.
Oh, jeez.
Has anyone had the ultimate purple haze combo?
I have not. I've only had the beer and the cheese, but I have not had the weed.
I've never had.
I think we've all heard the song at some point.
Yeah. I can do 3 out of 4 of those. Again, I'm not a smoker. I'm not an edible guy. So, I prefer meth, but that's just me.
Hey, quicker to the punch, right?
Doug, do you have another beer, sir?
I do, and it's a Gosta. Thank you for that unintended intro, Kern.
Absolutely.
I want to read to you what this is, because I got it just because of the oddness of it, because that's who I am. It's a barrel-aged Gosa. So it's a martini-inspired Gosa with botanicals from Old Home Distillers New York distilled gin, along with toasted Indian coriander. The beer was then aged in a gin barrel for 12 months, blended with a grape ale, and reconditioned on fresh gin-soaked oak chips. It is... Hey, if you're going to do all that weird shit, guess what? I'm trying that beer. So they could
that sounds fucking delicious.
They could say it was conditioned on Fruity Pebbles, and I'd drink it. So,
see, and that's one of the beautiful things about beer, is you legitimately can make a beer where you soak it with Fruity Pebbles or Lucky Charms or whatnot, and people are going to go out and buy and try that beer. Like, you make a wine that you ferment it with like 3 boxes of Lucky Charms. Nobody's going fucking near that wine.
I would, because I like Lucky Charms.
That's a fair. You're right. No, there's enough dumb people out there that will. Yeah.
I don't know if you can see because I have a dirty ass glass, but like, it's really got a lot of carbonation going.
Yeah, that's quite a head.
Oh man, that is super duper crisp. No, really crisp. Like, Gosas are traditionally crisp, but and not as salty. Like, Greg, I know you really get weird about the salt in Gosas, but that gin really cuts through it, and you just get that little hint of that coriander in there. Man, if it was a hot day, I could drink like 10 of these. It's really, really delicious.
I'm going to apologize in advance because my beloved girlfriend is arriving home and our dogs are about to freak out. So any squealing or barking you hear in the background is not it's not people chained up in the basement. It's just our dogs.
Well,
But you don't have to take my word for it.
I was gonna say the people in the basement, we already took care of them.
Yeah, we've done that.
That's how we make the wine. We have people in the basement too.
That was our Stubbs episode.
Fair. Few people know that Stubb was the inspiration for the people under the stairs.
Yes. So Kern, now it's time for our sponsor. It's time for you to tell us about your wonderful. You have a wine club.
Yeah. So it's, COVID has been a plague on this earth and here in the United States, but obviously there have been some bright points on it. And one of the things that happened was I was able to kind of relaunch my Forgotten Grapes Wine Club. It's something very cool that we do. And normally it's just for people here in California, especially Southern California, but we're starting to open it up to folks in other states. And what we do is every month we feature one small boutique winery from here in the Central Coast of California, either Paso Robles or the Santa Barbara area. We offer a 4-bottle for $100 special. Typically it's 1 or 2 whites, or maybe a white and a rosé, and then 2 reds. We have done a couple that have been all reds. And then there's obviously we do a flat shipping fee of about $25. Taxes obviously not included in that, so taxes on top, but it's a pretty small. And for the wines you're getting, which tend to be about anywhere from like $130 to $160 actual retail value, you're getting a great deal. And then the cool thing is you get the wines sent to you, or if you live in Southern California, we can do contactless delivery for them. And then I host a virtual tasting along with the winemaker where we pop those bottles open and talk through them and kind of meet the winemaker and get to know them. And it's very cool. We've had great response from it. We're growing every month. People love it. The wineries love it because it's a chance for them to really touch in a very intimate way. Okay, that came out so wrong. But it's a great way for them to get in touch with people who aren't familiar with their wines, spread the love, and just get their wines out in front of people. And of course, we only have top shelf, amazing wines. This is not like the other wine clubs that you read about that have big brands behind them where you're getting wines of questionable provenance. These are actual winemakers doing this. You're going to meet the winemakers, they'll talk you through the story of how they make it. It's really cool. And it's the great thing is you can, you get on the email list, you get the email. If you're interested, you contact me, say, yeah, I want this bundle. But you're not committed to anything. So if you don't want it, you can go months or years without a commitment and then finally see a wine that looks interesting. You go, oh yeah, let's try that. Boom. Let's do it. So you can check that out at forgottengrapes.com. We have all the info there. We have all of our wineries set through 2021. So you can see the wineries that are upcoming. Click on the link, go check out their pages, see what wines we're going to be featuring. It's just a cool way to try some really fun, small boutique wines, meet the winemaker, and a great entree for folks who, aren't that experienced with wine, because you're going to get to try lots of different things, but at the same time, really get to know both the Santa Barbara and the Paso Robles wine regions in California, which are, third and fourth in terms of the most prominent wine regions in the state.
Neato.
Thanks, man. So is there I'm not familiar with the wine delivery stuff. I know beer is like really freaking difficult to ship around because for some reason there's a lot of dumb laws around that. Is there certain states you can ship to doing that or no?
So same dumb laws, and because it basically applies to all alcohol. The one issue we have with the states is, so our winery partners are the ones who ship the wines out.
Daniel and I live in the same state, so yes, we have the same question.
Yeah. And New York is a tough one. So we're kind of beholden to the wineries in terms of which licenses they hold and which states they can ship to, which is why we haven't really been open opening it up. I do know that Florida is a state that we're pretty accessible to. Virginia is one that we can ship to quite a bit. New York in the past has been very accessible, but they've had some lawsuits recently, and the New York Alcohol Board has gotten really stingy. And part of the problem, and maybe you see this on the beer side because it's really the same group, is it's the distributors who are controlling everything. And the distributors don't want people to be able to buy product from outside the state because they're not getting their, 30, 40% or whatever it is. So they're the ones who are putting a lot of the pressure, who do most of the lobbying to the state legislatures to ensure that you can't get the wines that you want from small boutique wineries that, don't have enough volume to interest a distributor. But they don't want people in that state to be able to buy buy those wines there. And I'm sure you guys see that with, smaller places like the brewery in Placentia, I know doesn't have a lot of distribution around the country, except for maybe a few of their wines, or a few of their beers, I should say.
And that's a bummer because,
sorry.
I was just going to say, because like now we have there's a wine store that has a lot of stuff that we have a whole row of just California wines, except it's all big wines.
Yep.
Or they're little derivatives that they make, where it's like, oh, here's this wine, but here's this one that's just a different name, but coming out of the same winery, so that they can either charge more or make it seem like it's a different wine. So really, we're like, the only variety we get is from our upstate New York ones from the Finger Lakes, which has a lot of, weirdly, quite a good variety of wines considering their small growing season. But yeah, it's a bummer because I was like, oh, that'd be great. My wife really likes wine. It'd be cool to get her to try some stuff that's, we don't normally get. So that's a bummer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know Colorado is a state that is starting to open up. They've generally been fairly amenable to, letting people ship wines to Colorado. But the best thing to do is, if you are interested, go to forgottengrapes.com. You can sign up for our email list. You'll get the email. We basically just send 2 a month. You're going to get, the main one that tells you what the wine is, or what the winery is that we're focusing on, what the wines are. And then you'll get a second email, which will basically be you've got 3 days left to sign up for this. But in those emails, we will give you the states that we can ship to. So again, it's threading the needle a little bit, but if it's wines that you love and we can ship to your state, boom, Bob's your uncle. We can make that happen. So yeah, I would say sign up. There's no obligation. It's not going to cost you nothing.
Excellent. Go, Doug.
That sounded like a very infomercial way. There's no obligation.
Well, I used to do infomercials back in my salad days. So don't you remember me from GLH, the great looking hair spray on?
Is that your summer stock days?
The slap chop? I was slap chop before Vince was slap chop.
I'd like to repeat that this is one of the best coasters I've ever had. This is really freaking delicious.
I have to ask, do you feel like Frank Sinatra or Dean Martin, kind of like in a ring-a-ding-ding mode, since it's got that martini vibe to it?
No, but it is really dry, like a dry martini. That's how it finishes, and that's where they're getting their inspiration, I'm assuming. But obviously it's not a martini, but it's for a beer approximation. I mean, there's some breweries that will make cocktail style inspired beers. The Southern Tier Beer Company, which is in upstate New York, did a variety of those. I tried all of them, and the only one I liked was the Manhattan. And I like almost all of their beers. Their beers are outstanding, but that cocktail inspired line was, excuse me, not it. That was not the best thing I've ever had.
Nice. Well, let me ask you guys, and I'm sorry, Greg, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I know that there have always been beers that have been aged in bourbon barrels and gin barrels and wine barrels and whatnot. Is that still a big phenomenon? One of the things that I've seen in the wine business that I'm still not completely sold on is you're starting to see wineries that are aging their wines in beer barrels, in bourbon barrels, in liquor barrels, to add a little bit of that flavoring into it, particularly on the spirit side. You're seeing, mainly like bourbon and rye casks, but I have started to see quite a few like hopped wines. People dry hopping wines, during the end of the aging process. It's a little crazy.
I don't know why I'm laughing.
No, that's fine. I mean, I can't quite wrap my head around it too, but there are some Sauvignon, like Sauvignon Blanc will have some of those kind of, very resiny, piney notes to it on occasion. So there are some natural carryovers, but at the same time, a lot of times, to me at least, it feels like a gimmick for the sake of a gimmick.
I will say I have had, I bought Joel a bottle of, I don't remember which red wine it was, what style it was, but it was a bourbon barrel aged one. It's slight bourbon notes, just very slight. Like, I think just wine is such a strong, especially red wines tend to have such a strong profile that it's hard to really punch through that and get some of the bourbon notes in it. And I don't know, do you really want bourbon notes in your wine?
That's always been my thing, is outside of like a French 75 or an Aperol Spritz, I tend to be a segregationist when it comes to my liquors. That's the only thing I'm a segregationist on. Just want to point that out here because it's a terrible word to be throwing out. Right. Yeah, I've never been like a beer, there's kind of been a rise in beer cocktails recently, or people using rosé or red wine as a base for cocktails. And I just unless it's a tried and true proven way, like an Aperol Spritz, like a French 75. I don't want to mix. I don't want to mix those things. Not even a boiler. I mean, I'm not a big boiler maker. It's like, why put them together when I can drink them separately and they taste great on their own?
Right. So to answer your question, it's still big. I don't see it ever really going away as far as people trying to put beer in barrels. Another thing too, Kern, I don't know if you know, or I don't know if you've seen or felt, is the there was called a brut IPA, which they would use brut grapes. And they would use brut yeast, I believe. Daniel Fisher, you can help me. These beers come out very winey, very grapey, and it was a thing for a long time, for a short time, and then I believe the pandemic hit, and then it kind of just threw. That's another question I'm going to ask you about the wine industry, but it just kind of threw things kind of like back. It just threw things out of sorts. But there has been and then. Doug, we've seen some beer thrown in wine barrels, so there is this kind of I would call it an outreach from craft beer drinkers to wine drinkers and to people who come into breweries and say, "Well, I don't like beer," because people do that. They come into breweries and say, "I don't like beer," and we're like, "We're a brewery." So
we're not a bar, we're a brewery.
Right. So, what they're really saying is like, what else do you guys have besides beer? Well, we're a fucking brewery. But anyway, so then you can't say that shit.
So, I would love to see Greg point at someone that said that and go, "We're a fucking brewery." Watch that person faint off the stool.
Right. Right. And I would lose my job in 2 seconds. But no. So what's going on is they're trying to duplicate some of those wine aspects of beer.
Right.
And that's a great thing. Don't get me wrong. But there is that, I don't know, there's that, and I don't know, you're telling me that there's stuff going on with the beer. There seems to be this middle area now where people are trying to create between beer and wine, where there's a safe place where people who like both can hang out, or you're just kind of outreaching for, the wine people are kind of reaching over to the craft beer people because they know that craft beer people are like wine people in a way, in my opinion, that your tastes are, with all due respect, a little bit more refined, and you're looking for different tastes and you're looking for something better than what you're used to. I mean, that's what I liked about craft beer. That's why I jumped from the American light lagers to and that made me jump to, my box porters, stouts.
Right.
So, and I'm pretty sure the same thing is when you jump into wine. So yeah. I don't know. There's a whole bunch. I don't know if you respond.
No, and when you were talking about that, one of the first things that came to mind is, here in Paso Robles, we have the Firestone Brewery, and they make a wine. They make a beer called Rosalie. Right.
Firestone Walker.
Firestone Walker. But they make a beer called Rosalie, which is their rosé beer. Which the entire purpose of it is to basically try to emulate a rosé wine in beer form. And I have not yet had it, but I'm going to have to go out and try it. They even call it the Rosé Lovers beer. Jumping on the rosé thing. I want to take one issue with one of the things you said, which you keep talking about how people who like wine have these really refined palates compared to beer drinkers. And I would say that I think that's a bit of a stereotype, because a lot of the craft beer aficionados that I know, folks like you, folks like Doug, both you guys, Carla, the beer babe, a friend of our shows as well. Your palates are unmatched when it comes to beers. And, like you've said, there are so many little nuances and flavors, and being able to pick out the different hops, the different barleys, different processes. And at the same time, there are lots of wine drinkers I know who, if I put a Zinfandel and a Syrah in front of them, they aren't going to know the difference. They're just going to say, "Oh, it tastes like grapes," or it's just a big, heavy red wine. Mm-hmm. So I think, like anything, there are layers. I think that wine, because it got its start in Europe and the old world, as did beer, obviously. But beer was much simpler, where wine has always had the complexity to it. So I think, wine sort of got off to a head start as beer, especially here in the United States, where beer was always lagers and pilsners for what people were thinking. Right. But the gap between the two these days, I think, is much more narrow. And with the rise of chicharrones out there, that are, and chicharron programs, that you can go to a lot of places. Publican in Chicago is one that I've been to, that has an amazing curated beer list, and a chicharron who will walk you through everything and basically find the perfect beer to pair with your meal, like a sommelier does. Craft beer is growing leaps and bounds. And I think at the price points that you can find good craft beers at, it makes it much more approachable to younger generations than a bottle of wine. You can spend $7-8 on a really nice craft bottle of wine, where you're going to have to spend like 20, 25, 30 on a. Go ahead.
Is that true though? Because Doug and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Something about how the best wine is $10 or less. Is that now? Or $15 or less, right? Did we say something or see something about this, Doug?
I said something to the effect. I said something to the effect of, like, so when I shop for wine for my wife, or she shops for it, we generally don't buy a whole lot of super expensive wine, because when we go, we're getting 7 to 10 bottles of wine, so we're stocking it, and that can get expensive if you're not wary of what you're spending. Now, is it as good as some of the more expensive stuff? Probably not, but it's serviceable, I guess, is a better way to say it, if that makes sense.
The word chicharron makes me want to eat fried pork skins, but
yes.
They love it. They love it. I love how chicharron, like in Augie card.
Well, the problem is, if I pronounce it Cicerone, I sound like I'm talking about the lead singer of Van Halen during its darkest period. So,
Gary.
Oh, Gary. Cheers.
Wait.
Oh, you're gonna get some comments for that
Kern? What band was he from before that, Kern?
Extreme.
Yeah.
Hey, if you don't like what you see here, get the funk out.
Yeah.
And that is the perfect segue for Kern to really break down your podcast footsteps.
Yes. Yeah.
Perfect. This is why Kern, you probably are like, I probably couldn't fuck with you with music as far as that.
I don't know,
like,
man. You got good
you know
taste.
a lot about music, man, but you got like no, but like
Yeah, but
man,
Greg had the funk stuff down.
yeah, but you got Kern, man. You're all over the place, man.
Kern
So
has
anyway,
got
tell us about the podcast. I kind of cut you up. Tell us about the podcast.
Yeah,
where it came from, real quick, and how it evolved, and we'll
absolutely.
we'll
I've got what I like to call the Roach Motel brain, where things go in but they don't come out, which is how I remember all that stuff. But no, one bourbon, one Chard, and one beer. We are in season 4. It's technically our 5th year that we've been doing this.
Extreme is still kicking it, by the way.
Well, yeah, as long as Nuno Betancourt is still alive, Extreme will always be live.
Nose ring to the ear.
Well, that was Dave Snake Sabo from that was Skid Row. Yes.
I can't hear you.
Yeah, you got muted, Doug.
Doug, are you muted or I can't hear you?
We lost your sound.
Oh, I accidentally hit the mute button on my mic. Woohoo! Whoops.
What did you say, Doug?
I was going to say I thought Nino Betancourt did the nose ring to the ear thing, but you said it was a guy from Skid Row.
Yeah, it was Dave Snake Sabo who had that. From what I remember, I mean, Nuno could have had it, but I'm like trying to go through the Wholehearted and the More Than Words video, and I don't think he had it during.
No, but it was. But remember, Extreme also had like a harder edge to them. Those are like kind of their pop stuff, but they were a little harder outside of that.
That's a fair point.
Gotcha. Okay, so we saw the pop shit. Got it.
Yeah, Extreme 3, which was their poppy album, but Extreme 1 and 2, look out, those are rocking.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Wow, the pop one. Anyway, back to
all right, yeah. So one bourbon, one Chard, one beer. It was an idea that I had had in my head for a little while, and Stubb and I, had known each other since 2012. We actually met at the Portland Wine Bloggers Conference back in the day, and we had collaborated on
lots. I didn't know that.
Lots of different things. Yeah. And, I knew if I was going to do this, yes, thank you, darling, that there was nobody else in the world who could match me in terms of both their alcohol consumption, alcohol knowledge, but also their music consumption. So it's a very cool concept. It's the world's first and only drinking musical game show podcast. And what we do is every other week, we feature a very special guest. And as we mentioned, both of you have been guests on the show, and I'm hoping to have you guys. Well, the beauty is you get 2 chances, because what happens on the show is either myself or my co-host Stubb, we come up with a playlist of 7 songs built around a theme. And then the other co-host and our special guest have to decide whether each song is a beer song, a wine song, or a spirit song. Or as we say, is it one bourbon, one Chard, or one beer? But then you've got to pick the specific libation that goes with that particular drink. So you might say it's a beer song, but is it going to be a porter? Is it going to be a bitter? Is it going to be a lambic? Is it going to be a very specific brewery's lambic? If you're going to go with that. And you have to get inside the head of the person who put the playlist together and try to figure out what they think it is. So it's completely subjective, but it's shocking. And I know this from experience with you two, how competitive people get during the course of the show, how much research they actually do. And it's brilliant to see everybody's mindsets as to what they think. And if I remember correctly, I think it was you, Greg, we had our first ever perfect inning with, which was where the 2 competitors both named the same drink. And then that is what the person who picked the playlist was. And we've only had that happen in the course of, we've now done, we're over 100 episodes. I think we're somewhere in the neighborhood of like 120, 130 episodes. We've only had that happen 3 times. So it is our, perfect game type of situation, the perfect inning that we have.
Yes. And as you can see here, if you go to one bourbon, one Chard, one beer.com, which is down at the bottom, and you search Greg Washington, you will see my goofy face here and 2 podcasts. Those are the ones I did. If you do the same thing and put Doug Ziegler in, I'm pretty sure you'll see the same thing. You'll see two podcasts pop up. Currently, though, Kern said there might be a problem.
Yeah, you'll see everything on the website there. I mean, the best way to access the podcasts is through your phone, through however you normally get your podcasts, whether that's on Apple Podcasts, whether that's Spotify, whether it's Stitcher. There are so many ways. You can go to the website. We're having issues with our podcast library, the company that hosts our podcasts. For some reason, they changed their software and it changed all of the links that allow you to play it from the website. So what I'd recommend is just go to whatever your favorite podcast player is, type in One Bourbon, One Chard, and of course, bang that subscribe button, and you'll get every episode loaded in each time. What's great is, as I said, we do a new episode every other week, but in between, Stub and I do what are called Lil Tweeners, where each of us will take a week and basically just talk about what's happening in our worlds in terms of booze, in terms of music, in terms of movies. So it's kind of a fun way to catch up on pop culture. Interestingly enough, last Friday, I dropped a little tweener because my all-time favorite band in the world, Too Much Joy, dropped their first album of new music in over a quarter century, in 26 years. So I actually went track by track and did a review of the album. And lo and behold, Too Much Joy got a hold of that and shared it on Facebook and Twitter. So
Wow,
that's
cool.
the closest brush to fame I've had since I sat next to now deceased country music star Mindy McCready the one time I was in first class.
Cheers. You guys
Salud, my friends.
You guys saw Doug. If you search from there, Doug, you'll see Doug's. But yeah, like Kern said, anywhere you can get your podcast, just put in one bourbon, one Chard, one beer. You'll see it. You can probably scroll for Doug's. And I have an invite for another session. I just haven't responded, but I need to tomorrow, this weekend. I'm going to.
Yes, we want to book you, and then we'll get Doug next season. I feel like every season we need to have the brothers in booze represented in some way, shape, or form.
So what you're saying is Greg is Kern and I am Stubbs in the universe of
the hierarchy. Yeah, there is a
hardwood beer.
There is right. There is a hierarchy here. But no, the concept of your show is fantastic.
And it is an absolute blast to be on. It is so much fun.
And also too, you guys are sneaky. Like,
yes,
we are very
sneaky as fuck. You don't know this until you get on, and then they'll send you the songs, and like I was like, how do they know the songs I listen to? So then like these are Stubbs' playlist was all the songs I listen to, and it fucked with me because these are songs I'm so familiar with, but like I never thought of them in the context of the way you guys want me to think of them. I'm just like bopping around, bum bum bum, and all of a sudden I'm like, damn! And then you guys are like, Greg, you like some twisted songs, right? I'm bopping around, and I don't even know what the words of the song were until Kern told me, and now I'm like, oh my god.
Also, can I just say that the show Kern did and his whole theme was like one night stands. I was like, I have some questions.
Yeah, right. Well, Stub and I have.
Doug, we know you're the king of the one night stand. Right.
Stub and I have very
different. Been the case in a damn near 20 years.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Go on, Kern.
Well, you have one night stands. You just have one night stands with the same woman over and over again. There's nothing wrong with that.
I like that way of thinking. Yeah. That's excellent.
Absolutely. No, it's Stub and I have very different approaches to how we do the podcast, which I think say a lot about our personalities, where Stub loves to personalize his podcast or his playlist, I should say, to the guest. So he will always drop his late, but he, spends time researching whoever our guest is, finding an interesting factoid about them, and then using that to kind of craft his playlist. I, being a gigantic narcissist, will come up with my own playlist that entertain me and me only and stockpile them. And then for each guest, I'll sort of go through and whatever mood strikes me, like, oh yeah, that'll be a good one. Let's do that one. So one night stand one, the one that you had, Greg, the evil that women do. You know, I may have been in a darker place at that point, but
yes, cheers.
But it's fun. And one of the things that we love doing the podcast is not only playing with our guests, but the feedback that we get from our listeners, because we always encourage them to, you know, tweet at us, email us, hit us up on Facebook with when they listen to an episode, what they think their choices are. And sometimes they have much more inspired choices than we come up with on the show. So it's very, very cool, the feedback that we get. And it's why we love doing it. You know, we love our guests. We love music. We love having fun. And it's just a great little side project for us.
It is good times. What's
So
up,
I'm gonna jump to a third beer,
Nice.
and kind of piggyback, on your barrel age. This is a 1050 barrel age
Ooh.
that has been aged for a year.
Wow.
420.
Nice.
Look at that.
Damn video, Greg. You didn't even know I was bringing this on.
Oh, right. I didn't even have that for 420. I just had it.
Poor
Manny.
Manny's hammered, and he's like, "I'm on the show, guys."
And he's buzzed. What happened to you?
Wait till he have him on. Oh,
Good
boy.
job Ubering though, Manny. We
that's
we
very
appreciate
smart.
you doing
Good
that.
job.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
All right,
Hey,
so
Robert Scroggs. Yes.
yeah, I'm just gonna say that to be clear, Kern, Robert Scroggs was on our show and shotgunned a 1050 and a barrel age 1050 on the show.
Wow.
Back to back.
Wow.
He's also proudly the person who is he signed in the most to Untapped with that
Both
beer.
1050s.
Okay. He's the king at 1050.
Yeah,
Or you might say,
That guy knows.
Yeah.
That guy knows more about beer than.
could you say he's
forgotten more
is
than
he-
I'll know? So
is he 1050 cent?
Oh, he could be. That's his rapper name. Pretty nice head on it for a year aging. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
I got some nice bourbon notes on there. Now, 1050 is generally a pretty balanced barrel aged beer. Well, you age it for a year and it is bourbon all over the place.
Oh,
So
good. Bad.
it's good, but it's way more bourbon forward than it is normally. What's funny is I texted my brother-in-law and said, "Here's my lineup for tonight. What I'm drinking." And he goes, "Do you have a regular 1050 to compare it to?" And I go, "I don't need it. It's the Roach Motel brain." I can remember drinking 1050 and going, "This is what it tastes like." I haven't had a regular 1050 in probably 8 months.
Wow.
I know exactly what it tastes like, and I can. And this is it's just way more bourbon forward, but really good. Now, regularly it is 12.5%. I'm going to say that's much higher now.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question, Doug. You say that was that actually aged in barrel for a year? So would that was
No. This was bourbon barrel aged before I got the can, and I have
Okay.
I have a cellar fridge that is at 55 degrees that I cellar beer in.
I see. So that's been aged in the can for
Oh,
over a
no,
year.
More.
On its side, you seller.
Yeah,
Right.
I know, motherfucker. I know I cellar it wrong.
So this is a good question because this is something that comes up in wine. Barrel aging we can understand, but what does allowing the beer to age in the can or the bottle, like what does that add to it? Does it smooth it out? Does it eliminate the head? Does it increase the alcohol, decrease the alcohol? What's the process? Why would you age a beer in the can or in the bottle longer than when you're supposed to?
Oh,
You want me to go first? Okay. It depends on the beer. It depends on what you're aging. Certain things you shouldn't age at all. Like if you're going to have an IPA, most IPAs outside of like a handful of them, like a 60 minute, Greg, or 120 IPA from Dogfish Head, they recommend you can cellar. But if you have something that's really hop forward, you probably don't want to do that because it'll turn into like a malt flavor. Generally speaking, your stouts, your porters, there's a couple other things. Greg, I'm probably missing a whole bunch of stuff, but like it just depends on for me, it's an experiment. I don't know what it's going to do. I just will sell her stuff and see what comes out because I'm not an expert at all. I just sell her shit and see what happens.
Yeah, which is what we do. Which is what we do in the wine world too. So I have bottles of rosé in my cooler from like 2012. That at some point I'm going to pop one of those open, past its prime, and see if it held up and what happened to it.
Craig,
to answer your question, what does it add? Oxidation. What does it? Mostly, it takes away, in my opinion. It takes away from your adjuncts, your coffee. So if it has like cocoa nibs or any of that, that'll kind of go away. There's other things that it quote adds, but it's more. To me, it's more about taking away. And a lot of times, Kern, it could just make it smoother. There are times where it does take the alcohol edge off. Now, I'm not sure again what like Doug says, styles and all kinds of other things come into play. I'm sure you realize that, but it's more about taking away, in my opinion, and it's more about then just people wanting to see what the difference is between. And Doug likes to remember, how it was when he first had it, or there's a lot of times where there are times where you could try it in the brewery and then take a few home so you can have it fresh. You could have it like 6 months down the road. Doug's done, and then Doug's done like a year, and then we've talked about it. So there's a little bit, but most beer needs to be drank, as soon as you get it. Most of it. Fresh.
Generally speaking, I put the heavy shit in. Mostly, I will put the heavy shit in my solid fridge.
Yeah.
So our buddy Daniel Fisher, who has not only knows the shit about beer. He's what is he? What was that word before?
Polylibationist.
Yes. Daniel Fisher is. He knows. I wouldn't say he knows as much about the other things as he knows about beer. Maybe he does, but Daniel on Tap is where you can find him. But he's more poly than me and Doug are for sure.
He's already signed up for the Forgotten Grapes email list, so he's gonna hopefully get some good wine coming to him sooner rather than later.
So specific styles to structure, more resistant to oxidation, and then unless it's bottle fermented like Belgians, which changes that too. Manny wants to get wild in here. I think we already are. Actually,
aren't we already wild, Manny? Come on.
Actually, I got a wild video.
Let's do it.
People who don't like language, turn it down.
I'm literally shaking. I was just in Wyndham fucking Walmart, and there was this broad who kept giving.
Okay.
Broad?
Hold on. Oh, we'll get to it. But
wait, Aunt Rita? Why do you have a video of my Aunt Rita?
Isn't the warning? I was just in Walmart. Shouldn't that be okay? Well, here we go.
So the other thing I have to point out is her Philadelphia accent is on fucking point. That is so Philadelphia. It's not funny.
And her shirt says "fuck" right on it.
Fuck the mask. Apparently.
Yeah, we're gonna see. She's gonna show us her shirt.
I'm literally shaking. I was just in Wyndham fucking Walmart, and there was this broad who kept giving me and the kids dirty fucking looks. I'm assuming because, and none of us had our fucking masks on. So we leave Walmart and we're in the parking lot walking, and this fucking cunt swerved at me and my kids and then had the fucking audacity to honk at me. She fucking swerved. That bitch did it on purpose. I'm shaking. I can't even get in my car and drive right now. I had to grab my 12-year-old by his shirt and pull him. That's the world we live in now. It's a good thing she was in her fucking car. That's all I have to say. And if I ever see that woman again, I will beat her fucking ass.
She seems lovely.
I have to say, guys, Tabitha Soren from MTV has not aged well.
Like you, she likes meth.
I don't know. That doesn't seem like a meth lady. That seems like a barefoot Moscato or box of
Ooh.
Franzia
I'm
type of
literally
woman right
shaking.
there.
I was just in Wyndham fucking Walmart.
Or a barefoot birdie woman. Birdie, it's fancy. Look at it. It's bubbly.
She was just in fucking Wyndham Walmart. And when I saw that, I was like, here we go. Like, here we go.
Yeah.
So, Doug, here we go with a dark ass beard that I just
Yeah.
Wow. Jesus.
the Kern, we just started showing these Karens during the pandemic, and I just don't know where the anger comes with some people. Like, I'm glad that she at least went to her car and like she's not driving, like she's downloading in her car, so she's not gonna hurt anybody. She can run her mouth all she wants. She would have ran away from that lady anyway. Like she ran away this time, she would have ran away next time. Like, I think she's just all like, she's a keyboard cowboy. You know what I mean? Like, we're all big in our underwear at 12 o'clock at night on Google in the fucking comment section. You know what I mean? We're all big then. But if that person, when we were young, like if that person hits you in the playground, that's a little different than, you know what I mean, when you're home behind. And so to me, people don't feel like they're home because they get on Facebook Live and they're talking to their 4 friends that watch them. There's only 4 people watching.
Right.
Get me wrong. Yeah. They're like, we're going to put you on YouTube. You got 3 people following you. Who gives a fuck? Like, no one's ever going to see it. Like, let's just keep it real. Like, they think that they're like connecting with people. You know what I mean? Like, but the anger, Kern, like the anger with these anti-mask people, I just don't understand it. Like, I'm never going to, but I just don't get it.
I think it's actually pretty understandable, which is the problem is that when you know that you are in the wrong, but you absolutely can't change your opinion because you don't want to admit that you're wrong to anybody, and you're also being fueled by a certain cable channel that is, aping your position and telling you that everything you believe is right, and that you're owning a certain population of people by doing what you're doing. It breeds contempt, and that's what's coming out in this whole thing. It has nothing to do with like wearing a mask or sacrifice. It has everything to do with I feel oppressed and I'm going to lash out.
Help, I'm being oppressed.
Yes,
very Monty Python
I don't
style,
agree with it. Don't get me wrong. I think they're fucktards myself. And they should all be put on an island and we should drop Fat Man and Little Boy on them again. But
one of these perfect.
Yes. It's unfortunately they're I mean, I don't want to get off on a rant here, but unfortunately we live in we've developed the ultimate echo chamber for people like this, where you can go on your computer and bring up a program and immediately find 1,000 people who absolutely 100% agree with your opinion, and 1,000 people who absolutely 100% disagree with your opinion, and you can blast them all day and nothing comes with it. There's no discourse. There's no rational thought. It's welcome.
Yes,
welcome
that was an
to
excellent
America.
Reference. That was an excellent reference. However, Dennis Miller now is a very sad comedian because he is a very conservative comedian, which, as we all know, conservative comedians suck.
Dennis Miller's still a thing?
No, he's not a thing. He hasn't been a thing in a long time.
Okay.
But
I actually remember when he was.
He is, and I'm going to tell you, he's one of those guys like, all right, so there's some dudes that like have really fallen from grace from a comedy perspective for me.
Right.
This is a small tangent. He's one of them. I used to think he was funny because he would say these things that were just like really highbrow, but they weren't really highbrow. He was just using bigger words for what he was trying to say.
Right.
And then there's him. There's fucking Adam Carolla. Greg, you and I have talked about him. That motherfucker used to be funny, and then now he's on Fox News. If you're on that goddamn channel, you're out. And then
are you going to throw Joe Rogan in that mix? Because I think we need to throw Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan. Fuck that guy.
Yeah.
Joe Rogan, I don't know. I was always lukewarm on him. His stand-up was never that great. And then he went off the conspiracy thing. Like, my big one is Louis C.K. I really loved Louis C.K. before we found out what kind of a piece of shit he is. And I couldn't go back. I can't go back from that. But I loved Lucky Louie. I fucking loved Louis C.K. I can't even stand. I hear his voice for like 3 seconds, and my head wants to explode. And so, real quick though, I want to we're on a serious tip, and that's cool. But I kind of want to give back to something that Kern was talking about earlier, which is our buddy Manny. He loves cereal. Like that's his thing. So
cereal videos,
clearly.
Right. So he's a cereal beer guy. So Manny, in my opinion, is like he's like not every craft beer fan ever, but like he's like craft beer. Like craft beer people, there's a big segment of us who like this bullshit, like fruity. With all due respect, Manny. Manny comes from an angle of like I like cereal. So Manny gets cereal bars, any kind of new cereal. Manny's posted it. So he comes from that angle. So he's not really coming from he can tell me I'm wrong in the comments, but he's not coming from a beer angle, if you know what I mean. So he likes those fruity beers and those crazy beers. But there is like Manny is that person that we're talking about that we were talking about earlier, where he loves those
buys the gimmick beers.
Right. And that's part of like gimmick beer is part of craft beer, whether we like it or not, craft beer people. It's the truth. Whereas I'm with you. I don't see, again, the wine people, I just don't see it. Like, and I don't know, it's just what it is. It's just the beverage brings different people in, and it has a different culture. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's just really interesting how it rolls that way.
No, and I do absolutely. And to was making earlier, and you guys had talked about, which is that yes, the average price of a bottle of wine purchased in the United States is like somewhere between $8 and $9. So the vast majority of drinkers in this country are not they're not drinking $20, $30, $40, $50 bottles of wine. Much like I'm sure if you looked at the average price of a beer, it's probably, the cost of whatever a 6-pack of Miller is, or Bud, or these days. That's, Coors Light and Bud still tend to be the number one sellers, even although I know like Corona and Heineken have sort of been up there recently, sort of the mastige level, as they call it. But getting back to the gimmick thing, an interesting story about that. A good friend of mine, a guy named Roger Richards, who used to own a really nice wine shop in Newport Beach, California. He relocated it to a kind of hip mall in Costa Mesa near South Coast Plaza. I used to do wine tastings. Some of the first wine tastings I did under my Forgotten Grapes brand, I would do at his shop, and I would invite people to come out and pour wines for him. He had me there. And one day I was before one of my my tastings, and I was going through the aisles, and he had an entire shelf of Hello Kitty wine. I'm not kidding you. There is a Hello Kitty brand wine. And I picked up a bottle and I go, Roger, what the fuck is this? And he goes, that's what pays my rent every month. So we may not like the gimmick. People like Manny out there who will spend top dollar to take care of the gimmicks. And, there's only so much that the rest of us can do. Sometimes you just have to shake your head and go, all right, bye, Felicia.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, in our show, we kind of do the whole thing was like, you drink what you drink. And, we've had people drink seltzers on the show. Hey, whatever floats your fucking boat. That's fine. Now, the funny thing, just to circle back to Manny 1 second in a different way, is like with the cereal stuff, he actually does the thing where he'll blend cereals, like make a hybrid of like blueberry and crunch berries. And it sounds like just the weirdest thing. And he just like, no, I'm going to blend it. I'm going to do it. And I don't know. He does it. I think he does it with his kids and stuff. It's a pretty cool thing. It's just something where I think he extrapolates that into beer. And hey, you know what? Great. If that's your brand and that's something that worked for you and you like that shit, awesome, you know. And that Hello Kitty wine, I will tell you, you know who else does shit like that is the 19 Crimes thing.
Oh yeah,
where they've done this, they do like the weird gimmicky stuff. And there was like they did a Snoop Dogg wine. They do a thing where you take an app on your phone and you put it up to the bottle and like the prisoner talks to you on your phone. Like,
yeah,
the wine's not great.
Augmented reality.
Yeah. Hey, I'm talking to you, Manny. Damn it.
Hey, but speaking of cereal, has anybody done a frosted mini wheats beer? Because like I would be first in line for that, because that was my jam growing up as a kid, was the frosted mini wheats. And I could see like a wheat beer with a little sort of sweet frosting style flavor to it. Like that would be
fucking now.
That would be the bomb.
Don't give them any ideas.
And if not, I feel like we need to make this beer immediately and call it frosted mini beer.
I like that. Somebody made a brewery called Mirror Twin. Hold on.
Mirror Twin. All right. I will contact them tomorrow and have a 24
hold on,
shipped
Greg,
to my
you
house.
pull up that link. It's an untapped link. But it's an IPA that's strawberry frosted hazy wheats. It's the closest thing I could find.
Oh, corn pops beer, honeycombs beer. Honeycomb beer would be amazing.
Yeah, that would be good.
Damn.
Yeah. Or cinnamon checks. My favorite checks. Or cinnamon life. Sorry, cinnamon life.
Wow.
So, Colonel, real quick, there's or actually, here we go. Yeah, strawberry frosted hazy wheats.
Interesting. The strawberry takes me out of it, but they're almost there.
Yeah, right. Kern, so there's so some of our best bourbon barrel beer. In fact, I'm gonna say it, in my opinion, our best bourbon barrel beers are blended beers, meaning they take a bourbon barrel here and a bourbon barrel here, and then they blend them, and then they taste what's going on, and then they just do more of that experimentation until they get a really nice blend that they want. Some of our bourbon beers, especially from lower end, or I don't want to say lower end, I want to say lower budget beer places, they don't have the capacity or the time or whatever it is to blend these beers to make a really nice one, in my opinion. But wine has a lot of this blending, right? Or no?
Absolutely. And in ways that people are aware of, which is, you take 2 varietals, 3 varietals, blend them together in different percentages to make like the great wines from the Rhone Valley, the Southern Rhone Valley in France are always Grenache, Syrah, and Mourvedre. But at the same time, you also get things similar to what you're talking about, which is that, you could have, let's say, 10 acres of grapes, and you may pull, you may end up making 10 barrels of wine from that 10 acres, or, that's just an approximation. It'd probably end up being about 20. But you could feasibly pull barrels from different parts of that, or the way that they taste, and blend that together. So you're making a single varietal wine, but it comes from different vineyards, different parts of where you are. So that's absolutely the case. In fact, a lot of times if you see wine in your local supermarket or liquor store that just have a generic California label on them, so it'll say like a California Cabernet or a California Merlot. Typically, that means that they're sourcing Merlot from several different appellations in California, none of which matches the 85% threshold that you need to be able to call that varietal that particular region. So to call it a Napa Valley Cabernet, you have to have at least 85% of those grapes be from the Napa Valley. So when you see the California blends, it typically means that it comes from a variety of different places. Here in Paso Robles, we tend to be one of the biggest suppliers of grapes that go into those California blends, where they'll put, 70% Paso Robles grapes in, maybe 10% Napa, another 20% from the.
Damn. Right. Wow.
Yeah.
So there's that element of it, like where again, like most beer is produced, taste it. Don't get me wrong, we taste it and then push out.
Right.
Whereas it seems like
Yeah.
there's more steps here with wine and more. Again, it feels like there's more nuance before we get to pushing out, especially with the blending, because again that takes another level of, in my opinion, like quality control, tasting control. You know what I mean? Because again, if you don't have that blend that you like or that you feel is best, then you're going to keep blending or you're going to keep working, or you know what I mean. At some point, you got to stop and say, "Look, we got to put this out," and I got it. We got to make some money. But well, sometimes it feels like there's a little bit more tweaking. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And actually it's a big difference between what they call old world winemaking, which is pretty much how Europe makes their wines, and new world winemaking, which is, the United States, Australia, South America. In Europe, particularly if you go into like the older parts of France, or those that are protected by what they call an AOP, or an Appellation Origine Production, which basically means that like those wines have to be murdered by a group that says, okay, this wine is absolutely typical of what we're trying to do every year. But that being said, in France, they're willing to have the wine is basically a snapshot of whatever happens that vintage. So if it's a very wet year, the wine is going to taste a certain way. If it's a very dry year, the wine is going to be completely different, even if it's the same label. Here in the new world, and unfortunately this is starting to creep over into some of the mass-produced wines coming out of Europe, it's less about vintage and it's more about consistency of flavor, where you want that wine, no matter what year you buy it, to taste exactly the same. It's kind of the McDonald'sization of wine. And I know winemakers who work for some of those big producers, and they legitimately have like recipe books that they go by. And, their entire line of winemaking is that wine has to taste a specific threshold. It can't. And they will use all sort of techniques. They'll throw oak chips in. They'll add, distilled water if they need to. All sorts of different things that they will do to ensure that consistency across the brand is there year in and year out. It's very similar to, fine restaurants. The dishes on the menu that there's the head chef who's sitting at home or in a test kitchen who's putting this dish together and figuring out the flavors and whatnot. But then the way the restaurant really operates is the line cooks, whose job is to make sure that they're putting together 50, 100, 200 of those dishes every night, and they look and taste the exact way every time they push one out.
Right. So before we get to Doug's fourth beer, let me ask you a question that it's probably when I ask you, you're gonna be like, damn, dude.
Okay, I have to jump in with one thing, because Tony Hernandez saying muscadine is one of his favorite varieties. Like, you can go to hell, Tony Hernandez. Honestly, like, if muscadine is one of your favorite varieties, just stop drinking wine now. Stick with beer. Enjoy your Everclear, but muscadine. The only thing worse than muscadine, and Stubb will back me up on this, is Chamberson. And if anybody out there likes Chamberson, we're going to revoke your wine card.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay.
You asked me to be provocative.
Wow.
Tony can handle it. He's a big boy.
Yeah.
Anyway, right. We'll have follow-up comments, I'm sure. But Kern, I know that this is probably like a 10-minute answer that I kind of want you to condense if you can.
I will.
2 minutes, but it's gonna be tough. So I go pre-pandemic. We're talking pre-pandemic.
Yes.
One of the things that and me, Kern, and Doug, I don't know, we haven't really had many conversations, but political wise, we kind of agree on a lot of things. We do. I haven't gotten to the weeds with you where we disagree, but we kind of agree. One of the things that like annoys me about America, and you guys will probably agree with this, and some people might or not, and Go to the comments if you want. This is the American exceptionalism thing where you come into the thing where America is great at everything. And there's nothing that we can't do wrong. And if you're not, you need to go where you came from, that kind of like attitude. So how does this apply to beer and wine? Because I actually believe that craft beer, I actually believe that before the pandemic, American beer industry was the best place, period, in the world. I think diversity wise, I think the innovations that we were doing were just really top line. You could go, we had 8,000 breweries, different breweries. You had diversification. I mean, again, we need to get more diverse with, the people who work there and the women and people of color and all that. But as far as an industry goes, we're doing really well. And I wouldn't really want to be any place else for beer to be on. And you can take up Europe. Europe's wonderful. They have, traditions there are just crazy, kind of like wine. Where am I going with this? Where is California, in your opinion, worldwide as far as wine goes? Because I've heard, I've heard many things. I've heard one, I hear really great things about the diversity of California. You talk about the location diversity. You talked about how you could grow all these grapes. And again, California is, was founded 2 days ago compared to France. So, history-wise, you know what I'm saying? California is like a spring chicken. Yeah. France has been there. France is your grandfather. So how does California and America stack up wine-wise to the rest of the world? If you kind of want to be like, America's the best at everything, which, some people are. I'm going to say craft beer is the only thing that we're number one in. And the rest, we got work. Right. So
we're number one in spending money on national defense.
Yeah, but
that is also true. We're also number one in prison. We're number one in prisons, which is very exciting. Yeah. More incarcerated people in the United States than anywhere else.
Yes. Even China, which is saying something because China has way more people than us. Anyway, Kern, floor is yours.
Right. So, like, where are we at as a country? And even more specifically California, because California, from what I know, dominates the wine market in America, as it should, for reasons that you already spoke about.
So no, it's an interesting question. I think that in the same vein as football, and I'm talking about worldwide football, not American football. I think wine. Yes, soccer. Yes, wine is one of those places that I don't think there's a feeling, even among the wine industry, of an American exceptionalism. I think we still look to Europe as the benchmark that we want to achieve. And part of that is just simply the longevity for the amount of time they're doing it. But it's also a lot of the environment that they have over there that makes, the specific grapes that they're growing in their region so dynamic and so nuanced, to use a word you've been throwing out quite a bit tonight, Greg, which is appropriate. That being said, I think one of the things that California is doing better than anywhere else in the world is because we grow so many different varietals here. And because it's still fairly inexpensive to grow grapes here, and there's such a surplus of product, I think we have the best young up-and-coming winemakers, or winemakers that are willing to experiment and do different things, try new things, try novel things out there, more so than anywhere else. One of the blessings and curses of European winemaking is in the best regions, Bordeaux, Burgundy, the Rhone Valley, parts of Italy, they have very specific rules and guidelines about the grapes you can grow, how they have to be grown, how they have to be picked, how you have to bottle them, how you age them, what barrels you use, to allow those grapes to be called a Bordeaux or a Burgundy or a Barolo or a Chianti, whatever it might be. So it can be a bit of a restrictive process. And I know I've talked to winemakers in those areas who, make great Côte d'Arones, but would also love to be able to try to grow something unique in their vineyards, and they just can't because, you know, they're expected to make this type of wine, like Chianti Classico Reserve, exactly, things like that. California, because there are no restrictions on those things, or at least the restrictions are loosened, it gives us more of an opportunity to explore and experiment. And I think it allows for a market that's more willing to try those experiments and allow them to rise up. In France, you know, if you grow grapes in the Rhone Valley and you're in the Côte de Rhone appellation, but you make a wine that the Commanderie de Côte de Rhone, which is the group that decides every year which wines are Côte de Rhones and which ones aren't. If your wine is deemed not to be a Côte de Rhone or not to be typical of a Côte de Rhone, then you basically have to sell that at a table wine at more or less a loss for what you have. Whereas in California, you know, you can plant half an acre or an acre on your property of Mondouse, or you can go find somebody who planted Mondouse or Trousseau Noir or Kerner or Dornfelder or some bizarre grapes from weird places. Or you can take Pinot Noir and blend it with Syrah, which nobody does anywhere, but you might try it. And not only can you get away with it, but you can find an audience for that kind of thing. And you can make a living off of making wines like that. So to me, that's the one area that America is excelling in the wine business. You know, are our top line wines as good as what you find in France? It's comparable. You know, they did the famous Judgment of Paris in 1976, where California wines in a blind tasting, both in Chardonnay and head of first growth, Premier Cru, Bordeaux, and Burgundy wines. But that's not always the case across the board. So there are things that we do well, but I still think that the wine world is one where, you know, we're not number one type of situation.
All right. And before we get to Doug's fourth, Tony has responded.
Yes, and you know, I will tone down my my hate for muscadine. Muscadine is an indigenous grape that grows very well in warmer, more humid environments. So you find it quite a bit in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, places like that.
That's what Tony's from, South Carolina.
Yeah, it's this really thick-skinned, heavily tannic grape that requires a lot of expertise winemaking to turn it into, you know, a really nuanced, drinkable wine. And Montelena. And to answer Daniel's question, Chateau Montelena was the white wine that the Chardonnay that won the competition. Stag's Leap was the red wine, the Cabernet, that won the competition. If you've seen the movie Bottle Shock, that's all about the Judgment in Paris. It's half of a great movie. That's a good. That's a good question there. The rules are designed to maintain quality, but at the same time to kind of it is also an economic buffer for the winemakers themselves. So it's basically saying that nobody else can make wines of this type outside of. So it's a little bit protectionist in that sense. While it is intended to maintain quality, the problem is a lot of times you'll get winemakers who, because they're in an area and they may be good friends with folks in the commandery, can get a little lazy in their winemaking and maybe aren't making the best quality wines, but they know that year in and year out, their wines will be deemed to be part of that collective, and will get the
Yeah. So I will say that we were talking about Robert Scroggs earlier, who is teaching a online Cicerone class where he talks a lot about Cicerone. Sorry. But they do a lot of that in Europe too with beer, where it's like, here's your very restrictive way to make this beer in this region, and that's all you get. You get this, and this is how it is. If you make a Pilsner outside of this region, that is a different kind of Pilsner, and there's a very specific set of rules for different beers. So I think Europe isn't just doing that with wine. I think they're doing that with beer too. I mean, that is, it's like, well, you have the classic.
No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and it's just something where I think there's maybe it is protectionist, as you said. It's just like, hey, you can only do this here. I don't know. So like when you have Pilsner, a Pilsner is a Pilsner, but there's a Czech Pilsner. There's, there's 5 different kinds of Pilsners. It depends on where you're making it. Literally, that's all it is.
Yeah.
It depends on the water you have. Yeah. So yeah.
Or the hops that you're.
And as Daniel points, and as Daniel points out, there is the same thing with cheeses, where camemberts can only be made in a particular part of France using particular cows that have been grazed in a certain way. Epicenois the same way. It depends. Sparkling racism. I love that. Yes. But Doug, to get to your point, a little bit of it is protectionist, and I think a lot of it is this is just the way we've done things. Why do we need to change things? This has been done for 600, 700, 1,000 years. Like who are we to change the way that it's always been?
Right.
To quote Coming to America, I thought you were the king. That is a bit of a reference, but yes, and it's a very vague one, but it's a good one.
And Doug likes art on his beer containers, but I do not look down on it.
He's totally right. I judge a beer on that to start.
Tony, thanks. That's great. Thanks for that, Chuck.
Yeah. And actually, that is the same in the wine world, where, they've done studies that show that 50 to 60% of wine consumers buy their wine based on the look of the bottle. I've actually had distributors tell me that. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I do.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I wasn't sure what you were waving at. I was like, hi.
No, I was saying I do.
That's him. He's like, that's me. Right.
Yeah. No, it's true. And so I've had distributor.
Kern, what was this at again? I'm sorry.
I think I don't know the exact, but I think it's definitely over 50%. I want to say it's about 50 or 60% of wine buyers say that it's the label that helps them. That's the primary thing that they buy from. And I've actually had distributors, when I was running my own wine brokerage business, tell me that if you put a face artwork or an animal of any kind on your bottle, you are going to cut your audience immediately in half.
Wow.
Generic wine bottles in your supermarkets, because again, if you're a cat person and somebody puts a dog on the label, like, you're going to look at the dog and go, okay, but you're not going to be interested. Or if you see a white blonde face on the bottle, but you're Black or Hispanic, or you have dark hair, or whatever it might be, you're probably going to shy away from that because it just doesn't look like you.
I will give you an example of that. I bought one very expensive bottle of wine for my wife. For the bottle, like the bottle art, was The Prisoner, which I believe is a California wine. And the art on that is fucking unbelievable. And they made a series of them, and they're different wines, different varietals, and I can't afford them. But like The Prisoner was just like, that's a $45 bottle of wine. And I was like, I'm going to buy that for my wife, because my wife's an artist. So she's going to and she was like, this is the coolest bottle I've ever seen. And it was because it was just the art. The wine was good. It was not anything for her because she's not a connoisseur. It's not anything that's like, she's like, this is remarkably better than anything else I've had. But it was in the experience of going, look at this fucking artwork. And that's the thing is, like, Tony's saying that I see can art, and I've always said with beer, if you're taking time to make good art on your beer bottles and cans, you're taking time to make good beer. I'm wrong on that sometimes, not as much as you would think. I don't know if
Right.
it's the same. I don't know if it's the same for wine, but like I feel like, yeah.
Is that good?
By the way,
Phil?
that's a cool can.
Okay. It's a good beer.
Hey, man, I'll help your argument with 3 words. Hello Kitty.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah. So
People didn't care what the wine tasted like inside. It's just that it had fucking Hello Kitty on the bottle, and that's what they bought.
I'm going to give you the opposite. A great beer that has terrible can art.
Oh,
Black
yeah,
wheat wine.
that would do it.
Oh.
Not great can art.
Are those walnuts?
Excellent fucking beer. Oh my God.
Wait. Show that can again.
You've had this, Greg. I think I sent one to you.
Oh, I've had it. It's good shit.
It's a great beer. This brewery doesn't give a fuck about can art, but they make really good beer.
No. And the thing is, if you're a small winery that sells most of your wine direct to consumer, so through your own wine list or people coming to your tasting room, you can do whatever the fuck you want with your labels. We have a great winery here in Paso Robles called Peiche sur Terre, where they use a different artist for each of their labels, and they're very eclectic, kind of like chaotic 60s inspired pop arty labels, and they're beautiful and the wines are immaculate. The problem is if you want to move up from that level to the I'm nationally distributed level, and your wines are going to be in Walmart or Bevmo or Total Wine and More or Binny's or whatever, mega super specs, whatever supermarket you're looking at, you're going to have to compete against, hundreds of labels with lots of marketing and whatnot. So if you stand out, the odds are that, you're going to stand out in the wrong way and people will not be interested in you. So it's a fine line to walk, and something I talked and consult a lot of wineries about.
Yeah. Like I said, the Prisoner was an outlier just because that was something that I looked at and went, if that was a painting or a print, I'd want that in my house.
Yeah.
That's not something you see on wine or beer very much at all.
No. And the Orange Swift company, was so popular that they ended up selling that brand to, I believe it was either Constellation or Gallo for several $100 million. And, now that is the Gallo the Prisoner has now become a big mass produced prestige brand, trying to kind of push up into like the Opus One or Silver Oak or, category, or the Mondavi Reserve category, like that.
So that's like our InBev kind of group, Greg, I'm assuming. Like, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
I got one last question for you. I don't know what Doug has, but he gets a follow-up after me. One of the big things that you probably know about craft beer, and it used to annoy me, but it doesn't annoy me now because diversity for everyone, and you get what you get. That's great. But is wine as seasonal as craft beer is? And what I mean by that is that people really, really stick to some seasonal things when it comes to drinking beer. And I think it helps them navigate through all the different styles. So like, in the winter it's stouts, in the spring it's my box, in the summer it's shower beers or lawnmower beers.
Right.
What I don't feel that wine is this way. Am I wrong? And if I'm wrong, Kern, tell me what people should be looking for once they hit the wine, section in spring and summer coming up here.
So there are, it's a good question. Yes, wine is seasonal. Certain wines are absolutely seasonal. Much in the same way that I imagine people buy, Pilsners fairly year round. Because you can pretty much drink or an IPA, IPAs are pretty much, year round. Cabernet Sauvignons, year round, Pinot Noirs, year round. The big grapes that people are familiar with, even during the hot summer months, people will still drink. If you're having a steak, if you're having a burger, there's still this idea that you want a big red wine, even if it's, 95 degrees with 95 humidity outside during your barbecue. Where it gets seasonal is in the world of white wines to a certain extent, and especially the rosé wine market, where basically have a few rosés, but rosé wines won't really sell until you have that first warm burst of the year. And obviously that differs from state to state, but it typically happens somewhere between, mid-April to end of May. That's really kind of your start of rosé season. And then basically Labor Day weekend is the end of rosé season. And most stores come September, come October are heavily discounting, if not blowing out the rosé wines, because there's also this perception that rosés are only good if you're drinking the current vintage, a year older vintage of rosé. So right now we're in 2020s. A 2019 rosé is worthless to a store, more or less. So they will do everything they can to blow those out, and you'll find them. That's when you can go to like your, at least here in California, we have grocery outlet and whatnot, where you can find those wines at a song. You can find great rosés for $4, $5, $6 a bottle that normally would be 12, 13, 14, 15, $20 a bottle.
When is that? At the end of the summer?
No, it's generally like early to late fall, and then going through the winter, because basically they're just trying to blow out those wines.
Right. So if you're an all year rosé drinker, that's a prime time for you.
Absolutely. So grocery outlet is my jam, because I can go find 2019, 2018 Provençal, Côte d'Arc wine, Languedoc rosés that still are drinking fantastic, but I can get them for $3, $4 a bottle.
So there's no deterioration in the wine per se. It's just that people have moved on. It's like pumpkin beers. People will not touch a pumpkin beer, or an October. I'm sorry, people will not touch an Oktoberfest in November, even though that beer is still probably pretty good and it pairs well with everything in fucking Thanksgiving. Anyway, wow. Okay, so rosés in the fall out basically.
It's a great time to pick them up. And then in the winter, you can find a lot of your crisper white wines. So your Sauvignon Blancs, some of your Chenin Blancs. There is a little bit of a movement to try to get those wines poured during Thanksgiving. But when it comes through December, January, February into March, you can typically find a lot of your white wines heavily discounted or wineries trying to blow them out, because quite frankly, there's just not that much of a market. People are buying the heavier, richer reds at that point. Or if they're buying a white, it's something that has some barrel aging to it, like a Chardonnay, or it's richer, like a Roussanne or a Viognier, in that bigger sense.
Can I ask a question regarding those whites? Because so my wife is a fairly seasonal drinker, in that, like, if it's warm, it's whites. If it's cooler, reds. Not always. Sometimes she'll deviate, but like, is it okay? So like beer, sometimes you get beer and it's like, okay, well, you have to drink this fresh, otherwise that's just gonna suck. Can you store wines for white wines? I'm gonna speak to white wines specifically. I feel like red wines have a good shelf life. I don't know shit about white wines in that respect. How well do they keep over time?
White wines can actually keep surprisingly well. I've had whites from 2014, 2015 recently that, depending on the producer, and again, how they're stored, they can drink fantastically, still fresh, bright, or sometimes, they might pick up a little bit of oxidation, but that will actually enhance the flavor of the wine, because you start to get into a little bit of those burnt notes to counteract the fruit that's in there. So typically white wines can age longer than people expect they can. It's certainly less than a red. You wouldn't want to hold on to a white necessarily for 10 years, unless it's something like a Riesling that has maybe a higher sugar level to it, which acts as a preservative. But typically, because whites are lacking the tannins that red wines have, they don't last as long. But that doesn't mean you can't hold on to whites for, 3, 5, even 6, 7 year period and still enjoy them, and they'll still drink fresh and great.
Yeah, for me, it was just like I was looking at it like a white wine, almost like an IPA. Is like you should probably drink it a little more fresh. But like I said, because my expertise is that it's really thin. So thank you for that. That was
well, the beauty. I mean, the beauty is you never
more important than you probably thought it was. Believe it or not.
Absolutely. Hey, if I can help save your marriage by telling you that you can drink older vintage white wines, then I've done my job here.
So Kern, I said I had one last question, but now I got another one.
That's
so
okay. I can go all night.
Are wines like? Okay, so another thing that I think I know about wines is that I'm told that all wines age well, and is that true? And like, is there so for IPAs, you need to drink that IPA the second that it comes off, and if you can't, you need to drink the next day. You can't let it really go more than a few months, or it's just not that same beer. Are there any wines like that?
Yeah, there are certainly wines that are intended to be drunk very young. The probably best known answer for that. Hopefully, you guys can still hear me. You're a little frozen on my screen, but hopefully, I'm not frozen.
No, we can hear you.
Am I understanding?
I can hear you fine.
I was a little worried there. So the best known example of that is what's called the Beaujolais Nouveau, which is wines made in the Beaujolais region of France. So it uses a grape called Gamay. They use a very special technique called carbonic maceration, which is a very gentle fermentation process that ends up making a very light, fruity, almost slightly effervescent red wine. And what happens is they pick the grapes in August, start the fermentation, basically give it about a 6-week fermentation, and then throw it into bottle. And we'll release those every year on the 3rd Thursday of November.
Okay.
Day. But the entire purpose of Beaujolais is that it is absolutely supposed to be drunk within like a 6 to 9 month period, and not intended to be aged in any way, because there's just no tannins, no preservatives. It's high acid. It could turn very quickly. So there are some wines like that. But at the same time, most wines can, stand a little bit of aging, even if it's just a year or two. Part of the issue is, you never know what you're going to get. I mean, I have wines that you should be able to age for long periods of time, and yet the minute the cork comes out, whether it's TCA got in there, whether it's some sort of a fungus or microbe, whether too much oxygen came through the cork, the wine is ruined. And that can happen because cork is a living, breathing material. Sometimes, things get into the wine that you can't control. And corkage and spoilage is just a natural part of wine. Now, they're doing great things to try to lessen that, sanitizing corks better, using cleaner equipment. The use of screw tops, which has become much more accepted these days, helps lower those incidence ratings of wines being spoiled. But there's still the fact that, you can put 2 bottles of wine from the same producer, same vintage, down next to each other, and you open them up 5 years later, one is turned to vinegar and the other one is perfectly fine. There are just so many variables that you can't control. And it's one of the things that I think adds to the romance of wine, is that you can have these amazing wines that can last for years and years and years. And you have people who spend thousands, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on a bottle, and they finally open that up and it's
vinegar,
undrinkable vinegar inside. Exactly. Yes. Any tips for broken corks? Yeah, it's tough. The best thing to do is train yourself to use what they call an osso wine opener, which is the 2-pronged fork ones, where you actually kind of wiggle it down on the sides of the cork and then twist as you pull it up. That is what sommeliers will use for really old bottles where they think that putting a corkscrew and the violence of a corkscrew coming in will affect it, because typically corks tend to rot from the inside out. So the also helps basically provide leverage on the side to do it. But it's one of those things that you really have to practice with it, because you can very easily, if you're too forceful, push the cork down inside. So it requires training, young grasshopper.
Well, he says push the cork in. Is there a problem with that?
Probably not if it's a cheap wine.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with pushing the cork in. We've all done it at some point. But if it's a really nice bottle of wine, like if it's a $5, $10 bottle, you can, and the cork breaks, you can push it, that's fine. But if it's a $40, $50, $100, $200 bottle that you've been saving for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, you're gonna want to finesse the fuck out of that bad boy to make sure you get it out as much as possible.
Right. Like that port wine that I bought 15 years ago, and I did.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. One of the best bottle of wine I've ever had in my life was a bottle of Burgundy, a 1967 Von Romani, that some guys we met at a wine shop earlier in the day invited us to come back to the shop after it was closed and try it out. And the cork was so brittle that we spent about 45 minutes using ossos and corkscrews to try to extract it. And then when he poured the wine in, because it's a Burgundy, like all good Pinot Noir wines, similar to your IPAs, you do not want to aerate that guy. You do not want it to oxidize. You want to pour it and drink it as quickly as possible, because Pinot Noir tends to be a very quick oxidizing grape. So he poured it, and the color we decided to call it was brick cola. So basically it was like this sort of dark brown, orangish color. And we thought that the wine was it was ruined. Like from the color, the cork deteriorating, we're like, okay, it's a failure. And then you took a sip of that wine, and it was so lively. And you had these cherries, and I know you hate cherries, Greg, but you had these like just amazing red cherries and a little bit of strawberry and some rhubarb in it. And it was complex, but the fact that this 40-plus-year-old wine was still showing its youth, and not in like the 45-year-old divorcee going to like the club with the millennials and Gen Zers in it type of way, but like a really nice way. It was an amazing wine.
Well, damn. Do we have any other questions before we let Kern go here?
I have one little one. Have you ever seen the episode of Frasier where they found a bottle of wine and it was supposedly like hundreds of years old and they opened it?
Yes, I have seen that episode, and I have actually one of the prizes of my cellar is I have a bottle. I have actually several bottles of a 140-plus-year-old Madeira, which is a dessert wine from Portugal. And my girlfriend's and my tradition is I have one of them in a decanter, and every Christmas we pour ourselves a little bit of it and enjoy it. And it's amazing that wine is still as drinkable as it is with the amount of age that it's had.
Well, the point of that episode, Greg, is like they found a super old bottle of wine, and Frasier and his brother Niles were like super excited to try it, and they opened it, and it tasted terrible like vinegar. And they're like, "Where did he keep this?" And they're like, "By his furnace."
Yes.
In his furnace room. So it's like, what if you're like, hey, listen, I'm not a wine guy, but that sounds like a really bad idea to start your wine by your fucking furnace. So yeah.
I was similar story. I was staying at an Airbnb up here in Paso Robles, and the proprietor of the unit, and it was a guest house on her property. She knew I was in the wine business, so she was like, "Hey, can I show you something?" And she took me into her garage, and she had two bottles there. And she's like, what do you think of these? Do you think they'd be any good? And they were both what should have been fantastic wines. One was a 90 Jordan Cabernet from Sonoma, and then an 87 Jordan Chardonnay, which on their own would have been fantastic. But the problem was they had been in her garage in Paso Robles for the last like 15, 20 years. So the Jordan Chardonnay, the 87, it had evaporated down well below the shoulders and was basically the color of your piss when you're dehydrated. And so she's like,
me,
do you think this would be any good? Do you think this would be any good? And I go, I'm guessing no, but there's really only one way to find out, which is you have to open the bottle and find out. And to answer Lauren's question, you might be scared to try a wine when it looks that color, but I always think it's a learning experience because, there's a chance that it could still be good. But the fact is that even if it's bad, it's good to know what a bad spoiled wine tastes like, so that in the future, if you're ever confronted with a wine that might look good and has those same flavors, you can go, okay, this is spoiled.
I would like to point out that this shirt is not an indication of bad things because it's my Afro Beer Chick shirt. So yes.
Nice. It's a beautiful shirt. I love it. Although we could do without the mustard color, but hey, it's good.
Hey, I liked it because here's the problem. I have shirts that are black and green and blue, and that is the repertoire of t-shirts I have. So I just went for something that was a different color.
Yeah. And then to finish, I see Daniel's question there. That's like, again, we could spend 3 hours in your own show talking about underrated red and white varietals. I'll throw out just a couple, I think.
Give us a couple, right?
Just a couple because we'll be here for 8 hours.
I know. I'm a huge fan of the Cinsault grape, which I think is fantastic, and it's hard to find 100% Cinsault. But it drinks really, really well. In fact, I'd say any of the like lighter European reds, things like Mondeuse. What else is out there? Skypatino is fantastic. I think lighter red wines. The Gamay grape is actually the Beaujolais Cru wines are some of the best bang for your buck wines out there. So I think Gamay related reds are fantastic. I would also say Cab Franc and Petit Verdot are also highly underrated, as is Mourvedre. On the white side, I love Roussanne. Chenin Blanc, I think, is really making a comeback from when it was just a jug wine. So Chenin Blanc is a fantastic, underrated white varietal. I'm also a big fan of Italian whites. So if you've got something like a Vernacchia or a Vermentino or a Verdicchio, pretty much if it's Italian and starts with the dry, crisp, light, great underrated varietals for on the white side. And Pinot Blanc. I can't forget Pinot Blanc. Pinot Blanc from the Alsace fucking rules. Drink more Pinot Blanc, people.
Well, all right.
I think we got to wrap it up because we're well past 2 hours. I think we said 90 minutes, didn't we say, for you, Kern? We're like,
hey, like I said, I
were you gonna say, Kern? Go.
I was gonna say I told my girlfriend, not to expect me to go late. So as long as there is wine, I'm happy to go as long as we can.
Well, it was great having you, man, and we're gonna actually, again, we need to have you back with Stubbs, but we'll work on all that.
Yeah, we got to do it. We got to do a dual show with you too.
I'm telling you, I'm warning you in advance that if you bring Stubb and I on at the same time, it very well may be the end of the Brothers in Booze. I'm warning you now. You're more than welcome to do it, but I will. What
was the podcast that you blew up? You guys blew up. Say it here.
We like drinking episode 199. Yes, if you want to get the full Kern and Stubb on another show experience, we like drinking.
I think we had the full experience, Greg, because we were on their podcast. So yeah, I think we understand how it is. And listen, if we have had some guests go freaking longer than this, we've had multiple guests where it just goes fucking nuts. That's what we like. We don't want it to be just some sort of staid, easygoing. Hey, everybody, let's just hang out. Listen, we're not that show. We just drinking is a medium to talk for us.
Yes.
And
don't tell me you had guests. Oh, I was going to say, don't tell me you've had guests go longer than I have, because I want to break that record. I'm highly competitive.
Oh, well, you're a half hour short. So,
Oh, really?
Damn it. Let's keep going.
Okay.
I can answer any questions. Let's do it. Let's do a deep dive into Mourvèdre. Did you know?
No, this is the thing, though. I don't think you understand just how much, so a lot of our folks who tune in are beer hounds. But they want to learn about wine, and that's been great. Like, I don't drink wine on the show. Greg doesn't drink wine on the show. This has been marvelous to have you on and just being kind of an educator on this. This has been great.
Yes. Thank you, my friend, for coming on and telling us all about. We at least got one person to sign up for your newsletter, so that's great.
Yeah, I'll be doing this after the show. I just can't do it while we're doing the show because I'm not that skilled.
And thanks for bringing the knowledge, Kern, and jokes. We got next time he comes on, though, we're not going to be so wine forward. We got to talk about some. Is Kern still there?
Yeah, we didn't even talk about the Super League and all that stuff, which I'm really bummed about.
Yeah. But also though, Kern's knowledge of we could just sit here and talk radio and songs for hours. But is Kern still there? Anyway, I don't think Kern is still there. But Kern, thank you,
my man.
Yeah, he just dropped once I dropped him. So yeah, man, that was a great time. I like having people on who don't know or we don't know stuff about. It's great to have the beer people on. But yeah, Kern is
somebody who knows shit about wine, which neither of us are real experts at. You probably know more than I do. I don't know much.
Oh, Kern is back in the green room. Great. Here, let's bring him back on quick. We'll
sorry, Cass.
Yeah,
sorry. This is what happens when you live out in the middle of the country and your internet gets a little spotty at times. But
okay.
No, I just want to. I'll be quick. I just want to really thank you guys for having me on. This was fantastic. I love talking wine, obviously, if you can't tell. And I'm happy to always talk with wine with people. And I love I'm like I said, I'm a professional drunk, so I love interacting with you guys, learning more about beer. You guys educate me, I educate you. It's a symbiotic relationship. If you like what you heard from me, please check out me and Stub every week. Every Friday, we drop a new episode of One Bourbon, One Chard, or One Beer, which again, you can check out at our website, onebourbononechard.com, or wherever you get podcasts, One Bourbon, One Chard. Just do a search for that and you'll get it. And then, of course, ForgottenGrapes.com, my website. Please, if you love great wine or interested in exploring some of the best boutique wineries of California every month, please pass it along. And it was fun interacting with you guys. And I can't wait to have both of you on One Bourbon, One Chard, or One Beer again and deliver the ass whipping that you both deserve when you're on the show.
Yes, Kern.
On that note, we'll see you in post-production if you want to stick around, my friend. Otherwise, we will have you back.
Oh, yeah, I can do that
as soon as possible.
Yes. See you later, man.
Yeah,
Thank
I got
you.
a couple of minutes.
Thanks, Chris Kern.
Our pleasure.
Awesome.
Take care.
Cheers.
Cheers.
All right, Doug. So we went long. I'm going to go short on this part.
We're going to do it quick.
My favorite of the night was this Hop Butcher Juicy Deluxe. Anything, if you put Sabro hops in your beer, I'm sold. On the Badger Beer Hour 2 nights ago, we had the Working Draft guys, and they had one of my favorite beers ever, the Sabro single hop.
Single one. It's single hop, right?
Yeah, and I had the brewer on, and I was like, man, that's the best beer ever. He's like, we're going to get that going because you said it. Yes, love it.
Hey, man, I'm not a Sabro guy, but I want to try that shit if you get it.
Sabro is, you should be a Sabro guy. It's fucking nice, calm, not bitchy IPA. Does that make any sense? It's not over bitter. It's just really, really approachable. My second favorite one was this Creek from Modern Fucking Times. Great. I love Creek, man. Creek's great. Hearty as fucking hell. It takes some of that edge of that cherry off that I don't like. And last but certainly not least was this guy that we didn't really talk about that much. Reality Maze Bourbon Barrel with coconut. I'm not the biggest coconut person, so that's why I was third. But it was really well balanced. It was good. The coconut wasn't crazy. And again, we had a great guest, so who gives a shit?
So I don't have a loser in this at all. I had 4 great beers. So I'm gonna say least favorite, but that's a bad way to describe it. This is really good, a really well balanced coffee brown ale. Really fucking good. I really like that. Yeah. So tie between my 1050 1 year aged. The thing was the 1050 was just really super bourbony forward. So it just really brought that out. We've had this on the show before. Both of us fucking love this beer. This black wheat wine. It's goddamn amazing. Really fucking good. I think I need to see if I can find more of that so I can stockpile it. But this was seriously the best Gosa I think I've. One of the best Gosas I've ever had. A gin barrel aged Gosa with Indian coriander, and it was almost like a champagne-y feel to this. It was like really light, effervescent, and with the coriander and the gin notes. Talking cursive, man. They make some oddball shit, and it just fucking all of it works. So yeah, that was my winner.
Chlorine.
Chlorine? What the fuck are you talking about, man? Yeah.
I'm not sure where Manny is.
Chlorine.
Yeah, I'm not sure where Manny is literally physically, like location wise. Is he in an Uber? Where the fuck is he on? Or where is his head at? Because he's had some, and yeah. So Doug, next week we have Chelsea Alt. She's a female semi-pro football player.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. And she's also played with the boys semi-pro.
See, that's the great thing. And I have a lot of questions for her. This is gonna be a really fun one.
She's a badass. It's gonna be fucking great. I met her through when I was playing semi-pro. And we'll get into all that. So yeah, it's gonna be fun time. So Doug, have a great week, and we'll see you next week. Maybe we'll see Casey. Maybe we won't. You'll have to stay tuned for that. Casey kind of comes and goes as he pleases. How we let that.
The guy's a busy dude.
Right. But whatever.
Yeah.
So am I. Fuck it. I'm here every week. What the fuck? Anyway.
Come on, Casey, motherfucker.
Hey, what the fuck? Well, you gotta come back for your fans. Anyway, Doug, have a great weekend.